a lot of what we're discussing now is about communication. So I'm just going to stir it up a bit with a question. Beyond the appeal system, which is equally dysfunctional, is there any mechanism to make local authorities more accountable for delays in determining applications? Duncan, this lands squarely in your, how do we just sue all of them into oblivion and force our schemes through?
I've threatened to judicially review local authorities for not making decisions, not through planning, because you can't judicially review them because you've got a right to appeal and non-determination, but on some other sort of quirky things in sort of allied sectors like caravan licensing and stuff like that. Sometimes it is necessary to get out a big stick and to go public. And it tends to be more of a PR thing based on something legal rather than something purely legal. And it's genuinely disappointing when that is your only way of doing this, is effectively shining a spotlight and saying, can we all please look at this individual and what they're doing, and then make a decision about whether we think they're sort of doing that genuinely in the public interest, and whether or not there's some competency being shown there. I have more and more instances where people say, you know what, I'm just going to do it. If the local authority hasn't got enough time to process the application, they're not going to have enough time to come out and take enforcement action against me. And I'll just put in a retrospective application, or I'll just put in an appeal when they go to enforcement, and so be it. And it's a point I made in answer, I think, to the first question, which is about a lack of faith in the system. It all starts to fall apart, and they just go, and no reflection on sort of Torbay. Thanks, David, for coming and sort of putting that point across. But this is across the country, where people just say, none of them are any good, and we're just going to get on and do it and roll the dice, and so be it. A lot of it depends on people's attitude to risk and funding, but people are really, in a quite sort of militant way, challenging the legitimacy of the planning system. If they can't process an application for amending a condition on occupancy of a holiday caravan or something, and they can't do that, they can't even get a decision within 6 months. I got Teambridge said, oh yeah, we're looking at 22 weeks for determination of this from the point of validation. 22 weeks. Okay. That people just go, I'm just going to do it anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Sam, militant uprising, is it time to just start ignoring the planning officers and building what we want?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, and I had exactly the same situation with a client who had a habit of build it and then wait for the enforcement letter and then apply. And we worked really hard with him, different authority, not Torbay, and we worked really hard with him he wanted another building. Worked really hard with him, persuaded him to go for planning first, and then I think it took us about 8 months to get it valid. They were asking for lots of additional information, which we just didn't feel was necessary. They were raising spurious issues, including heritage impact on a heritage asset, which was about 2 miles away on the other side of a hill, and you couldn't see it from the site. And he had that same issue by the time he'd get permission, but the build costs had gone up. And he's never going to do it in the right way again. We worked really hard to get him to do it in the right way, and then the council just completely let us down with the process. It is really difficult. We've obviously got the planning performance review consultation, and that is looking at raising fees to provide more resourcing, and as part of that, looking to impose a more refined series of performance measures. I think there is merit in that, but then again, it's another burden on the council, so it's more resource heavy. But I think a more subtle breakdown of how councils are performing, how the extension of times are being used, because to take David's point, it's just treated as a matter of course now, and quite often applicants don't really want to give them, but they're worried if they don't, they'll get a refusal. And if ultimately councils aren't engaging, and this is the big problem I find, there's some really good officers out there, some really good authorities, but a lot of officers, they just don't respond to emails, they don't respond to a phone call, you cannot get hold of them. And to then say to a client 6 months in, I don't know what's happening, I haven't had a response, it's not acceptable. Even if it was a quick 5 minutes, I'm busy, it's going to be 2 more weeks before I'll get to look at it, at least then you can manage it. And in those cases, you are going to default by planning by appeal, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it does seem to be going that way more and more now. Justin, is it time to storm the walls?
Thank you. Well, a number of good points made there, and I think picking up. I mean, it's great. I suppose that Duncan is looking at it from that perspective of, and I think sometimes it's really important to do that, shine the spotlight on and say, look, it can be at times it's a real problem. I think the way we are and is to try. How can we work together to achieve what we want to achieve? But I think Sam's have hit the nail on the head. We have with one local authority, not Torn Bay, I won't mention them. It can go months and months without an answer. And these are massive commercial issues that we're trying to raise with them because of delays through planning. We are now in a different, I mean, the environment now for building is quite different to 2 years ago. But planning, we bought the site in question, we bought 2 years ago, having agreed numbers probably 2.5 years ago. So the development process goes on for that period of time. We've had massive change during the period of time. But when I wait 5 or 6 months to even have a response to something that's got a massive commercial impact, it just, I mean, as everyone will know on this seminar today, there is so much involved in development. I mean, it's the same with everyone's work, I'm sure, but there are masses and masses of little bits that need to be done every single day. So to have something that's huge and commercial that's just left on the back burner for months has a huge impact. We are currently building houses at the moment, which we don't even know what tenure we're going to be able to achieve with them. And we're building them, and I'm having to make decisions on is it one thing or the other thing. It's crazy, really. But can we sit down and understand that? So as Sam said, not getting answers, and I sort of question really, if I maybe cheeky to David, is as I look at it, if we could have very quick but perhaps quite off the cuffs of comments and a review of things. I was really encouraged to hear you say that officers are looking at the validation, because that's great. You can get the validation quickly. We've only once done it with a local authority, but it was fantastic. It was to sit down with all parties within the council and us and the architect. We sat around the table face to face, and we just chewed the fat. But it was probably about an hour on a scheme, and we got so much covered in that hour. It was at council offices, so she should have taken officers no more than an hour of their time to do. We achieved an awful lot by doing it, and then we could go away and do what we needed to do and come back, feed that information in. But it would be helpful to understand what can we do to sit alongside you, because we're all really trying to achieve the same thing: is good development. And if it's not good, we need to be improving it. That you've made the point there, David, that officers need to say if it doesn't meet the policy or it's not acceptable for some reason, tell us and make sure we are doing good development. But ultimately, we want to get to a point where it is good development, as do you. And so we not work closely together to achieve that.
I think it comes back. There's an interesting thing that comes out of this was an earlier point of Sam's, which is officers being officers rather than post holders. During the war, back in the day, whatever you want to call it, officers made decisions, whereas now it seems everything goes out to other consultants who carry a lot more sway. David, I'll come to you on and then I'll wrap up with you on one last question, if that's all right. It would appear that any additional resource you get needs to go into enforcement. Is that how it feels?
I've just been with my enforcement team this morning, and they're all holding their head in their hands with the sheer number of cases there are, many of which are actually put forward by some of our own planning officers, which I know is very conscientious when they're out and about, but the enforcement team don't need additional ones from our own officers. But I'm really pleased to hear Justin and Sam's point about working together, whereas the question I think was phrased in what can we do to make the local authority do this? It is about us working together. It is about us communicating. I know we didn't have a big turnout at our forum last week or week before, Tony, but the idea of having those conversations, making sure we realise the implications for you as planning agents acting for a client when you've got nothing to report to that client. And I do realise that even an update of some sort that you've been told there's 2 more weeks to wait for Natural England's comments or whatever, so you've got something to report to your client is really important. So that communication is important. I'm afraid a lot of the officers have become entrenched. I've realised that they perhaps this is the COVID link, Tony, that your title of the seminar is, that people are a lot more working from home, agile working. I'm trying to get them back into the office a bit more regularly so that there's that peer-to-peer learning and understanding about different cases, and picking up for the greener planners to pick up on some of the more experienced planners. knowledge and information, but also just about styles of communication and going back to you as agents about particular schemes. But my one point of warning, I suppose, is that we're being driven down a performance culture of a lot more KPIs across the organisation, and I'm constantly on to the teams about performing better and getting their applications through. And so that links in with the question about the timeliness of determination of applications. What I don't want to get to is a point where officers feel under pressure they can't ask for extension of time. They're just going to refuse an application because they've got to get it out in that time. And I've seen authorities try and adopt that process that all applications will be determined within time, and then you get bad outcomes or you get refusals that don't work. So it is about us working together, as Justin said.